Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you tales of courage, resilience, and transformation. Today, we dive into the remarkable journey of Rachel Harper, a woman who overcame betrayal, rediscovered her strength, and built a life of purpose. From the shadows of a controlling relationship to the triumph of reclaiming her independence, Rachel's story is a testament to the power of perseverance and self-belief. Hit subscribe to join us and embark on this inspiring journey. Let's begin today's story and remind ourselves that every ending is just the start of something new. Rachel Harper leaned back in her chair, the soft lighting of the Manhattan restaurant casting a golden hue on the table set with fine china and crystal glasses. The hum of quiet conversation filled the air, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the aroma of her grilled halibut. She had chosen this restaurant deliberately, its elegance and exclusivity aligning with the significance of the evening. It wasn't just a dinner, it was an unspoken test. Kevin arrived late. As always, he swept in with a disarming smile, his perfectly tailored suit giving him the appearance of someone in complete control. Rachel watched him approach, noting the way he glanced around the room, a practiced charm in his every move. When he reached their table, he leaned down to kiss her cheek. "You look stunning," he said, pulling out his chair. His eyes swept over her emerald green dress, a gift from her mother, and lingered just a beat too long. "Expensive," he added with a smirk. Rachel forced a smile, choosing not to address the veiled comment. Instead, she shifted the conversation toward lighter topics, hoping to create a calm atmosphere for the discussion she knew was inevitable. For years, she had endured Kevin's subtle criticisms and control. Tonight, she wanted clarity, even if it came at the cost of discomfort. Their waiter arrived, and Kevin took charge of the wine selection without consulting her. It was a small thing, but Rachel felt the familiar weight of his decisions overshadowing her own preferences. As the waiter left, Kevin launched into a monologue about his latest business ventures. Rachel nodded along, her mind drifting. His words sounded rehearsed, like an actor playing a role he had written for himself. "So," Kevin said suddenly, breaking her reverie, "how's work? Still caught up in that corporate chaos?" Rachel set down her fork, carefully composing herself. "It's been challenging but rewarding. We just launched a new initiative focusing on sustainable investments. It's something I've been passionate about for years." Kevin shrugged, swirling the wine in his glass. "Sounds noble. But don't you ever get tired of it? All that stress. The long hours. I mean, you don't need to work. We're doing fine." The words stung, though she had heard them before. Her career wasn't just a job, it was a part of her identity, a source of purpose. "My work matters to me," she said, her voice steady. "It's about more than money." Kevin leaned back, his smirk deepening. "Of course. It is. You've always been so driven. But don't you think it's time to focus on other things? Like starting a family? You're not getting any younger." Rachel. She felt her cheeks flush with a mix of anger and humiliation. His comment hung in the air, sharp and cutting, and the murmur of nearby diners seemed to amplify her discomfort. Rachel's mind raced, searching for a response that wouldn't escalate the tension. "I didn't realize my career and our future were mutually exclusive," she said finally, her voice even. Kevin waved a hand dismissively. "I'm just saying you've already achieved more than most people. Maybe it's time to enjoy life." The waiter returned with the main course, the interruption feeling almost merciful. Rachel stared at her plate, the intricate presentation mocking her crumbling composure. How ironic, she thought, that everything around her seemed so polished while her life felt so fractured. As the meal wore on, Rachel grew increasingly aware of the distance between them. Kevin's words, his tone, even his body language all carried a subtle condescension that left her feeling small. The man she had once admired, who had seemed so supportive and genuine, now felt like a stranger. When dessert was offered, Rachel saw an opportunity. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of her wine glass. "Why don't you handle the bill tonight?" she asked casually. "You've been so generous lately, it's my turn to let you take care of things." Kevin froze, his fork hovering mid-air. For a moment, his polished facade cracked, irritation flashing across his face. He quickly recovered, laughing as if she had made a joke. "Come on, Rachel. You know I don't carry that kind of cash around. Besides, you're the one who wanted to come here." Rachel tilted her head, her voice steady but firm. "I thought it would be nice to treat you for once." "Or do you mean to say you can't?" The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin's jaw tightened, and his eyes narrowed. He set down his fork with deliberate precision, leaning across the table. "What are you trying to prove?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "You're really going to pull this stunt here? In front of everyone?" Rachel met his glare with quiet determination. "I'm not trying to prove anything, Kevin. I just thought it was fair." His anger erupted. He slammed his fork onto the table, drawing startled glances from nearby diners. His face flushed with rage, and the carefully curated charm he wielded so effortlessly evaporated. "Fair," he spat. "You want to talk about fair? Everything I've done for you. For this marriage. And this is how you repay me? You think you're better than me because of your daddy's money? You're pathetic." Rachel felt the sting of his words, but she refused to shrink under his glare. She straightened her shoulders, her voice calm but resolute. "This isn't about money, Kevin. It's about respect. And it's clear I'm not going to find that here." Kevin's face contorted with rage, and before Rachel could react, he grabbed the dessert plate in front of him, a beautifully crafted chocolate tart, and hurled it at her. The plate shattered on impact, the dessert splattering across her dress and face. Gasps echoed around the room as diners recoiled in shock. Rachel sat frozen for a moment, the remnants of the tart sliding down her cheek. Then, slowly, she stood. The humiliation she had felt moments ago was replaced by a calm determination. She reached for her napkin, wiping her face with deliberate precision. "This is over," she said quietly, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Kevin and the shattered remains of their relationship behind. The cool night air hit her skin as she stepped outside, and for the first time in years, Rachel felt truly free. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she made her way to a waiting cab, her mind swirling with thoughts. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as she sank into the back seat, she resolved to take back control of her life step by step, piece by piece. Rachel Harper sat in the dim glow of her parents' kitchen, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the comforting aroma of toasted bread. The kitchen was warm and familiar, a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind. She clutched her mug tightly, her hands trembling slightly as the weight of the evening began to settle over her. Her mother, Eleanor, sat across from her, her sharp, knowing eyes filled with concern. Rachel's father, William, leaned against the counter, his tie loosened and his expression a mixture of worry and restrained anger. It was late, and the quiet of the Harper household felt almost oppressive as the events of the restaurant replayed in Rachel's mind. "You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready," Eleanor said gently, breaking the silence. But Rachel shook her head, a small, bitter smile curving her lips. "No, Mom. I need to face it," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. She took a deep breath, the warmth of the coffee grounding her as she began to recount the night. She spoke of Kevin's criticisms, his dismissive comments about her career, and his refusal to pay the bill, a seemingly small moment that had unraveled so much more. When she described the dessert he had thrown, Eleanor inhaled sharply, her hand flying to her mouth, while William's jaw tightened, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the counter. "I don't know how I let it get this far," Rachel admitted, her voice faltering. I kept telling myself that if I tried harder, if I compromised more, it would get better. But it never did. I couldn't see it until tonight. Eleanor reached across the table, her warm hand covering Rachel's trembling one. Sweetheart, you've been carrying this burden alone for too long. You don't have to anymore. Rachel looked up at her mother, her vision blurred by tears she had held back for far too long. I didn't want to disappoint you and Dad. Everyone warned me about him. But I thought I could make it work. I didn't want to prove them right. Rachel, William said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. You've never disappointed us. You tried to build something real. Something meaningful. That's not a failure, it's bravery. But staying with someone who doesn't value you? That's not bravery. That's self-sacrifice. Eleanor nodded, her grip on Rachel's hand firm but gentle. You deserve better. Rachel. You always have. And now, you're taking the first step toward something better. The words washed over her like a balm, soothing wounds she hadn't realized were so deep. For the first time in what felt like years, Rachel allowed herself to feel the full weight of her emotions. The tears came, hot and cathartic, and Eleanor moved around the table to embrace her daughter. William joined them, his presence a steadying force as Rachel let herself cry in the safety of their arms. By the time the tears subsided, the exhaustion was undeniable. Eleanor helped Rachel upstairs to her childhood bedroom, a space that felt frozen in time. The bookshelves were still lined with her favorite novels, and the familiar lavender-scented sheets wrapped her in a cocoon of comfort. For the first time in years, Rachel felt a sense of security, and as she drifted to sleep, she knew that the hardest part was yet to come, but she wasn't facing it alone anymore. The next morning, Rachel awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, illuminating the room in a soft, golden glow. For a moment, she lay there, savoring the peace. But as her mind cleared, the reality of her situation crept back in. She had walked out on Kevin, left behind their life together, and now faced an uncertain future. She dressed in a simple blouse and slacks she found in her old closet. A far cry from the polished designer outfits that had filled her wardrobe during her marriage. It felt liberating, in a way, to shed that version of herself, even if only symbolically. Downstairs, her parents were already seated at the breakfast table. The scent of pancakes and freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a comforting reminder of the home she had once known so well. Eleanor greeted her with a warm smile, and William poured her a cup of coffee, his actions unspoken gestures of support. We've made some calls this morning, William began as Rachel sat down. There's an attorney, Amanda Carson, who specializes in cases like yours. I trust her, and she's agreed to meet with you tomorrow. Rachel nodded, gratitude welling in her chest. Thank you, Dad. I don't know what I would do without you both. You don't have to know right now, Eleanor said, her voice soothing. One step at a time. Rachel. That's all you need to focus on. The rest of the day passed in a blur of small actions that felt monumental in their simplicity. Rachel sorted through her belongings, making a mental list of what she needed to retrieve from the apartment she had shared with Kevin. She drafted an email to her manager, explaining that she needed a few days off to handle personal matters. And in the quiet moments, she allowed herself to sit with her thoughts, processing the enormity of the changes she was about to make. That evening, as Rachel sat in the living room with her parents, she found herself reflecting on the person she had been before Kevin. Strong, independent, unafraid to take risks. Somewhere along the way, she had lost that version of herself. But now, sitting in the warmth of her family's home, surrounded by their unwavering support, she felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would not be easy, and she knew Kevin would not let go without a fight. But as Rachel looked at her parents, their love and belief in her shining through, she felt a strength she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know exactly what the future held, But for the first time in a long time, she believed she could face it and win. The following morning, Rachel Harper stepped into the office of Amanda Carson, a sharp-eyed attorney whose reputation for handling high-profile divorce cases was well known in Chicago. The office exuded professionalism, with sleek modern furniture and walls lined with framed certificates and accolades. Amanda greeted Rachel with a firm handshake and an understanding smile, her demeanor immediately putting Rachel at ease. "Let's get started," Amanda said, motioning for Rachel to sit. "Tell me everything." Rachel began recounting her relationship with Kevin, starting from the early days when his charm and ambition had captivated her. She described how his subtle criticisms and dismissive comments had escalated over time, how he had isolated her from friends and family, and how he had taken control of their finances under the guise of protecting their future. By the time Rachel reached the events of the previous evening, her voice was steady but laced with emotion. Amanda listened intently, her pen moving swiftly across a notepad as she jotted down key points. When Rachel finished, Amanda leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You've been through a lot," Amanda said, her tone empathetic yet firm. "But the good news is, you have a strong case. We'll focus on 3 key areas: financial misconduct, emotional abuse, and any attempts Kevin has made to manipulate or control you. The evidence will be critical, so we'll need to document everything: bank statements, emails, text messages, anything that supports your account." Rachel nodded, relief washing over her at the clarity of Amanda's plan. For the first time, she felt as though she wasn't fighting this battle alone. "There's one more thing," Amanda added, her gaze steady. "Kevin may try to retaliate, whether through public smearing or private intimidation. Men like him don't handle losing control well. You'll need to be prepared for that." Rachel swallowed hard, the weight of Amanda's words settling over her. She had no doubt Kevin would fight back, but she was determined to stand her ground. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice resolute. The meeting concluded with Amanda outlining the next steps: gathering evidence, filing for divorce, and preparing for any counterclaims Kevin might make. As Rachel left the office, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face it. Back at her parents' house, Rachel began sorting through the remnants of her life with Kevin. She pored over bank statements, highlighting discrepancies that pointed to his unauthorized withdrawals. She scrolled through old text messages, finding examples of his controlling behavior and dismissive comments. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming her narrative. Her parents were her anchors during this time, offering steady support without overstepping. William helped her organize the financial documents, his sharp analytical mind a valuable asset, while Eleanor provided emotional support, always ready with a warm hug or a listening ear. The house, once a place Rachel visited only for holidays and obligatory family dinners, now felt like a sanctuary. Amid the flurry of activity, Rachel found moments of quiet reflection. She thought about the woman she had been before Kevin entered her life: confident, ambitious, and full of dreams. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of that version of herself, trading her independence for the illusion of a stable partnership. But now, piece by piece, she was rediscovering her strength. A few days later, Rachel received a call from Amanda. "We've filed the initial paperwork," Amanda said. "Now we wait for Kevin's response. In the meantime, I want you to be vigilant. If he reaches out, document everything. And if he becomes aggressive, don't hesitate to call me or the authorities." Rachel thanked her and hung up, her mind racing. She hadn't spoken to Kevin since the night at the restaurant, but she knew it was only a matter of time before he made contact. True to form, Kevin didn't wait long. One evening, as Rachel sat at her desk reviewing documents, her phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed Kevin's name, and her stomach tightened. After a moment's hesitation, she answered. Rachel. Kevin said, his voice sharp and devoid of the charm he once used to disarm her. We need to talk. There's nothing left to discuss. Rachel replied evenly, though her pulse quickened. Kevin scoffed. Oh, I think there is. You think you can just walk away from this marriage and take everything with you? You're out of your mind. Rachel's grip on the phone tightened. I'm not taking anything that doesn't belong to me. Kevin. You exploited me for years. And it's over. If you have something to say, go through my attorney. You really think you can hide behind a lawyer? He snapped. Meet me. Tonight. You owe me that much. Rachel hesitated, every instinct telling her to refuse. But a part of her wanted to confront him, to face him head-on and assert the strength she was reclaiming. Fine, she said finally. But we'll meet in public. They agreed on a neutral location. A bustling cafe in downtown Chicago. Rachel arrived early, choosing a table near the window where she could see the street outside. As she waited, she steadied herself, reminding herself of everything she had endured and the progress she had made. When Kevin arrived, he was impeccably dressed as always, his polished appearance a stark contrast to the tension in his posture. He sat across from her, folding his hands on the table as if trying to compose himself. This isn't how it's supposed to be, he said, his tone deceptively calm. We're supposed to be a team. Rachel met his gaze, her voice steady. A team? You've spent our entire marriage tearing me down, isolating me, and stealing from me. That's not a team. Kevin. That's control. Kevin's composure cracked, his voice rising. You're delusional. I built this life for us while you played at being some corporate savior. You're nothing without me. Rachel's hands trembled under the table, but she refused to let him see her fear. You're wrong. Kevin, she said, her voice unwavering. I was someone before you, and I'll continue to be someone long after you're gone. You don't define me. Kevin leaned back, a bitter smile curling his lips. You'll regret this, he said. I'll ruin you. Do your worst. Rachel replied as she stood. I'm done being afraid of you. Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked out of the cafe, her heart racing but her resolve stronger than ever. She knew Kevin wouldn't back down easily, but for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The confrontation with Kevin at the cafe lingered in Rachel's mind as she stepped into Amanda Carson's office the following morning. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows did little to ease the tension she felt as she recounted the previous night's encounter. He said he'd ruin me, Rachel told Amanda, her voice steady but her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I'm not sure what he meant, but I know Kevin. He doesn't make empty threats. Amanda leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes narrowing. It's a typical tactic for someone like Kevin, intimidation and manipulation to regain control. We need to be proactive. Document his threats. And if he contacts you again, let me know immediately. We'll also start gathering evidence of his attempts to smear your reputation. Rachel nodded, her resolve hardening. For years, she had tolerated Kevin's behavior, hoping he would change or that she could find a way to make their marriage work. But now, as she sat in Amanda's office, she realized how much of herself she had sacrificed to maintain the illusion of stability. Those days were over. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of preparation and self-discovery. Rachel worked closely with Amanda to build her case, sifting through financial records, emails, and text messages. Each discovery felt like peeling back layers of her own story, a painful yet empowering process that revealed how deeply Kevin had infiltrated every aspect of her life. But Kevin wasn't idle. True to his word, he began spreading rumors about Rachel among their mutual acquaintances. He painted himself as the wronged party, claiming she had abandoned their marriage and prioritized her career over their relationship. Rachel heard the whispers, saw the raised eyebrows when she entered a room, and felt the sting of judgment from people who had once been her friends. It hurt, but she refused to let it break her. Instead, Rachel leaned into the support of those who truly mattered. Her parents remained her steadfast anchors, their unwavering belief in her giving her the strength to face each day. Eleanor's quiet wisdom and William's strategic mind were invaluable as Rachel navigated both the emotional and legal battles ahead. Angela, her best friend, became an ever-present source of encouragement. One afternoon, over coffee in Angela's sunlit kitchen, Rachel found herself pouring out her frustrations. "I just don't understand how people can believe him," Rachel said, her voice tinged with frustration. "They've seen how he treats me. How can they not see the truth?" Angela reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on Rachel's. "Because it's easier for them to believe his lies than to confront the reality. People don't like to get involved in messy situations, it's their way of staying comfortable. But you don't need them, Rachel. You have the truth. And you have people who love you." Rachel nodded, her chest tightening with gratitude. Angela had always been there for her, even when Rachel had pulled away during her marriage. Now, more than ever, she realized the value of that unwavering friendship. At work, Rachel began to rebuild her professional reputation. The whispers about her personal life couldn't overshadow her dedication and expertise, and she threw herself into her projects with a renewed sense of purpose. She spearheaded a new initiative focused on mentoring young women in finance, channeling her experiences into something meaningful. One evening, as Rachel sat at her desk reviewing documents, she received an email from Amanda. Attached was a file containing evidence of Kevin's financial misconduct. The documents detailed unauthorized withdrawals, extravagant purchases, and accounts he had concealed from her. There were even emails between Kevin and business associates that revealed his attempts to leverage her family's name for his own gain. Rachel stared at the file, a mixture of anger and relief washing over her. For years, she had doubted her instincts, questioning whether she was overreacting or imagining things. But here, in black and white, was proof of everything she had suspected. It was vindication, and it strengthened her resolve to see the process through to the end. Amanda's voice on the phone was calm but determined. "This is exactly what we needed. It strengthens your case significantly. We'll present this during the hearing, and it will be hard for Kevin to refute." Rachel thanked Amanda, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. Hanging up, she allowed herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. She thought about the years she had spent walking on eggshells, second-guessing herself, and sacrificing her happiness for someone who had never truly valued her. That chapter of her life was ending, and she was ready to embrace what came next. The hearing was fast approaching, and Rachel knew it would be the most challenging part of the journey. Kevin would fight hard, not because he cared about salvaging their marriage, but because losing control wasn't something he could accept. But Rachel wasn't the same woman who had entered that marriage. She was stronger now, bolstered by the support of her family, friends, and her own inner resolve. One night, as Rachel sat on the balcony of her parents' home, the Chicago skyline twinkling in the distance, she allowed herself to dream of the future. She thought about the life she wanted to build, a life where she could thrive on her own terms, unburdened by the weight of someone else's expectations. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in years, Rachel felt hopeful. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom, she was fighting for herself, for the woman she had once been and the woman she was becoming. And that, she knew, was a battle worth winning. The courthouse loomed tall and imposing as Rachel stepped out of her parents' car, her heels clicking against the polished stone pathway. The chilly Chicago air bit at her cheeks, but she barely noticed. This was the day she had been preparing for, the divorce hearing, the culmination of weeks of emotional and legal battles. Her parents flanked her on either side, their presence a steady source of strength. William placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this, Rachel," he said, his voice calm but firm. "This is your moment." Eleanor nodded, her gaze filled with quiet determination. "You've done the hard part already, sweetheart. Today is about showing the world what we've known all along, that you're stronger than he ever gave you credit for." Rachel took a deep breath, allowing their words to settle in her heart. She tightened the scarf around her neck and entered the building. The echo of her footsteps a reminder that she was no longer the woman who had once cowered under Kevin's control. She was here to take back her life. Amanda Carson was waiting inside, a vision of composed confidence in her tailored suit. She greeted Rachel with a firm handshake. "You're ready for this," Amanda said, her tone both reassuring and commanding. "Stick to the facts. Remain composed. And trust me to handle the rest." Rachel nodded, her nerves held in check by Amanda's unwavering demeanor. Together, they walked into the courtroom, where Kevin was already seated at the defendant's table. His face was a mask of polished charm, but Rachel noticed the tension in his jaw and the tightness in his posture. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and Rachel saw a flicker of something she couldn't quite place: fear, perhaps, or the realization that he had lost the upper hand. The proceedings began with opening statements. Amanda spoke with precision and clarity, outlining the case against Kevin with a calm confidence that left no room for doubt. She presented the evidence of his financial misconduct, his attempts to manipulate Rachel's reputation, and his pattern of emotional abuse. Each piece of evidence was a blow to the carefully curated image Kevin had tried to maintain. When it was Kevin's turn to speak, he launched into a performance Rachel had expected but still found jarring. He painted himself as the victim of a cold, career-driven woman who had neglected their marriage and left him without warning. His voice was measured, his tone almost pleading, as he described himself as a man who had simply tried to support his wife. Rachel sat silently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Every word Kevin spoke was a reminder of the man she had once loved, the man she had believed in despite the red flags. But she also knew that the version of himself he was presenting was a lie, a carefully constructed facade that she had seen crumble time and time again. When it was her turn to testify, Rachel rose from her seat, her legs steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Amanda gave her an encouraging nod as she took the witness stand. The courtroom fell silent as Rachel began to speak. She recounted her marriage with a clarity that surprised even herself, detailing the years of subtle criticisms that had eroded her confidence, the isolation from her loved ones, and the financial exploitation that had left her questioning her own judgment. She described the night at the restaurant, her voice steady as she relived the humiliation and the moment she decided enough was enough. "I stayed because I believed things would get better," Rachel said, her voice firm but tinged with emotion. "I thought if I worked harder, if I gave more of myself, it would save our marriage. But I realized that no amount of effort could change someone who didn't want to change. I deserve better. And today, I'm taking the first step toward building the life I deserve." When she finished, the courtroom was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Even Kevin, who had spent much of the hearing scribbling notes or glaring at Amanda, seemed momentarily disarmed. The judge adjourned the proceedings, announcing that a decision would be rendered the following week. Rachel left the courtroom with her head held high, her parents and Amanda by her side. The outcome was no longer in her hands, but she knew she had done everything she could. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. In the days that followed, Rachel threw herself into her work, finding solace in the projects she had once loved. She reconnected with colleagues, mended friendships she had let slip, and began to rediscover the vibrant, confident woman she had been before Kevin entered her life. Each step forward felt like a small victory, a reminder of the strength she had always possessed. When the ruling finally came, it was swift and decisive. Rachel retained full ownership of her assets, including the financial investments she had worked so hard to build. Kevin's claims were dismissed, and he was ordered to repay a portion of the funds he had misappropriated. The weight of the decision hit Rachel like a tidal wave: relief, vindication, and closure all at once. As she stood on the steps of the courthouse, the sun breaking through the gray Chicago sky, Rachel turned to her parents, their pride evident in their smiles. Eleanor embraced her tightly. "You did it, Rachel," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You took your life back." William nodded, his hand resting firmly on her shoulder. "This is just the beginning. The future is yours now." Rachel smiled, her chest swelling with hope. For the first time in years, the horizon felt wide open, filled with endless possibilities. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. And she was ready to embrace the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. The weeks following the court ruling were a whirlwind of transformation for Rachel Harper. The courthouse victory was more than a legal win, it was the first tangible step toward reclaiming her life. But Rachel knew that true freedom wouldn't come from a court decision alone, it would require rebuilding the pieces of herself that had been worn down over years of manipulation and control. Her first move was to reconnect with her work in a meaningful way. Rachel had always found purpose in her career, and returning to the office felt like coming home. She threw herself into her projects with a focus and clarity she hadn't experienced in years. But this time, it wasn't about proving anything to anyone, it was about rediscovering her passion and using it as a foundation for her future. One morning, as she sipped coffee at her desk, Rachel received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "We're here for you." It was from a junior associate on her team, someone Rachel had mentored briefly before her marriage consumed her attention. The message thanked Rachel for being an inspiration, for showing that resilience and courage were possible even in the most challenging circumstances. The words touched Rachel deeply. She realized that by sharing her story, she could offer strength to others who might feel trapped in situations similar to hers. That email sparked an idea, one that began to grow as she reflected on her journey. She wanted to create a space where women could find resources, community, and support to rebuild their lives. The result was the launch of a foundation, the Resilience Network, dedicated to supporting women who had experienced emotional and financial abuse. Rachel poured her energy into the project, reaching out to colleagues, friends, and her professional network for support. The foundation quickly gained momentum, drawing attention from the media and receiving generous donations from those inspired by Rachel's mission. One evening, as Rachel prepared for a meeting with the foundation's advisory board, she glanced at the mirror in her office. The woman staring back at her was almost unrecognizable from the person who had walked out of that restaurant months ago. Her eyes sparkled with determination, her posture radiating confidence. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. The foundation's first major event was a gala held at a restored industrial space in downtown Chicago. Rachel worked tirelessly to ensure every detail reflected the mission of resilience and hope. The room was adorned with warm lighting and modern decor, creating an inviting atmosphere for attendees. On the night of the gala, Rachel stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. Familiar faces filled the room, her parents, whose unwavering support had been her anchor, Angela, who had been her rock through the storm, and many colleagues and friends who had cheered her on from the sidelines. "Look at you," Angela said, embracing her tightly. "You've come so far, Rachel. This is incredible." Rachel smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Angela. You've been my constant, even when I couldn't see the way forward." Angela stepped back, holding her at arm's length. "You did this, Rachel. You found your way. Don't ever forget that." As the evening progressed, Rachel took the stage to deliver her keynote speech. The room fell silent as she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "When I started this journey, I felt like I had lost everything: my confidence, my independence, and even my sense of self," she said. "But I learned that we are never truly lost. We are simply waiting to be found again. And sometimes, we have to find ourselves, She shared pieces of her story, not as a tale of despair, but as a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of community. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause, the energy palpable as guests stood in admiration. After the event, Rachel stepped onto the rooftop terrace for a moment of quiet. The city skyline stretched before her, a sea of lights and endless possibilities. The cool evening breeze brushed against her skin, and she closed her eyes, savoring the moment. "You were incredible." Eleanor's voice broke through the silence. Rachel turned to find her mother standing beside her, a warm smile on her face. "Your father and I couldn't be prouder." Rachel felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you and Dad." Eleanor reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've always been strong, Rachel. Even when you didn't see it. Watching you take back your life has been the greatest gift." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city together. Rachel's thoughts drifted to the future, a future that felt bright and boundless. She thought of the women she hoped to help through the foundation, the stories she wanted to amplify, and the impact she wanted to create. As she turned back to the party inside, Rachel felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The road ahead would have challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced the storm and emerged stronger. And now she was ready to embrace the life she had fought so hard to reclaim. This was her beginning, a life lived fully, on her own terms. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the best was yet to come. As Rachel Harper gazed out at the glittering Chicago skyline from her rooftop, a deep sense of peace washed over her. The past year had been one of struggle, growth, and transformation. She had faced down the shadows of her past, reclaimed her voice, and rebuilt her life piece by piece. The foundation she had created was thriving, and every story of resilience from the women she helped reminded her of the power of hope and determination. Her journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. She was no longer the woman who had dimmed her light to let someone else shine. Rachel was stronger, more confident, and unapologetically herself. The future stretched out before her like an open road, filled with endless possibilities. As she raised her glass in a quiet toast to the night sky, Rachel smiled. This was not just an ending, it was a new beginning. A life lived on her terms, filled with purpose and joy. If Rachel's story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales of courage and transformation. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement. And remember, your story isn't over. It's just beginning.